Richard, can you hear us?
Hello, I can.
Excellent.
It's like the English takeover tonight, isn't it? I think Lloyd's like attracting us all.
I think you've given me an idea there. I think we may need to have a UK invasion for a future talk, Heathen. Who knows? We'll see.
We've already had a Canadian invasion on the Atheist Experience, so why not?
Okay, so I wanted to ask you about a lot of people in our community, the atheist community, talk about when they're referring to religions, they say all religions are cults. Now, you two are from a cult background, and I want to know what your perspective is on the difference between a traditional religion and a dangerous cult.
This is my exact soapbox. So thank you so much, Richard, for calling with this exact question. I've made videos about this. I have jumped in the live chat to correct people on this. Not all religions are cults. Oh my God, they're not. It's what I would give to have been raised in a religion that was not a cult. I mean, the differences are staggering. For one thing, most of the time, the vast majority of the time, if I tell your run-of-the-mill Christian about my Christian upbringing, they're like, oh my God, what the fuck? That's so messed up. And I'm like, yeah, I know. I know it was messed up. I was in a cult. And they can't relate to any of those experiences because they haven't experienced them, because I was in a cult and they weren't. And that's just an experience thing. But like, you know, if you want to bring in the bite model, that's a really good example. There are just so many levels of control and secrecy and manipulation that don't exist to the degree, at the very least, in most major religions, mainstream religions, that exist in cults. I mean, you know, like I'm pretty sure the Catholics don't have a secret book that only priests are allowed to read, and that if anybody else wrote it, they could get excommunicated from the church. Like, this stuff is not a universal experience. And to act as if all religions are cults in the same way is like, no, because first of all, it completely diminishes the experience of actual cult survivors, because like I said, if I could have been raised in a mainstream religion, oh my God, I would totally have chosen that, because it would have made my life better. My life was worse as a result of being in a cult. And that's not to say that people don't feel like shame and manipulation and things like that in other religions, but largely those come from the specific people who are practicing and teaching the religion and enforcing it. It could come from family. It could come from a particularly terrible pastor or something like that. But in a cult, it's the whole group. They all do that. The people that don't are the exceptions. It's okay. I'm gonna breathe.
Are you okay there, Rudy? You okay? Just need a moment.
Yeah, this is just one of those topics that always gets me going. And I'm glad that I get to have my my little soapbox moment. But I'm sure you have ideas to contribute to this as well, Lloyd.
I do. I just don't want to upset you because they're slightly different. That they are, broadly speaking, the same. Look, I think cult is a problematic word. I think it's a word that doesn't really advance the conversation. And I think, yes, when we're speaking about groups that aren't directly inflicting damage on people, the word cult is useless, essentially. But I have a slightly unorthodox view on this, which is to say that I think that if you take the most benign group, religious group imaginable, and you know, what would that look like? So let's say you have a group that says, right, we absolutely need to give money to poor people. That's our religious dogma, because there is a giant rabbit in the sky that tells us that we need to do this. This giant rabbit created all things, and this giant rabbit insists that we give money to poor people. So that's what we're going to do. So imagine you had a group like that, and the result was that poor people got given money, it would be a good thing. The bad thing would be that people would be believing there's a giant rabbit in the sky that created all things. And this belief would be passed on to children. And so children would be given wrong information. They would be indoctrinated. And I think all religions are guilty to varying degrees of child indoctrination, which I think is harmful. I think it's a detrimental thing to do to a child, to fill their head with things that aren't true as though they're true. And so on that basis, I think that there are such things as soft cults. Again, it's problematic to use the word cult when you have a soft cult because they're nowhere near the level of damage that Rudy's just been pointing out. But then you have extreme cults. And at the furthest end of the scale, we can point to cults that are literally going around and killing people that aren't part of their group. But somewhere in the middle, you have groups like the group that Rudy and I have emerged from that are keeping secret databases of child molesters and breaking apart families through shunning and persuading people to die rather than accept blood. And when you have that situation, I think that's where the word cult is needed. It's not just justified, it's actually necessary to use that word. But I personally don't use the word cult when I'm talking about groups where there is far less control, as identified through the bite model, which Rudy alluded to. Rudy, does that sort of sound reasonable, or are we?
Yeah, no, I would not disagree with that at all. I get that, you know, words have multiple meanings, and on a broader definition, it's not wrong to say that religion, that cult can be a variation of the word religion and vice versa. It's just that when we're talking about extreme cults, when we're having this
conversation about cults, we need to be clear, and we can't muddy the water with groups that are nowhere near as bad. That's what
exactly. And so it's like when people throw around the word cult to describe pretty much any run-of-the-mill religion, it's like, wait, why would you say that? Because that doesn't match with, you know, what in my experience of being a cult survivor, it just doesn't make sense. Like, and I get that people who have not been in cults may not understand that and may feel like I'm just like policing language or whatever, but I feel like it muddles the definition, or it muddles the meaning of the word if we're just going to call any old religion a cult. Because I don't even think
renders the word useless, doesn't it? If you paint with too broad a brush. Yeah.
Right. Because I don't even think that all cults are necessarily religions. I've seen like yoga instruction groups that turned into cults, you know. Any high control group can be labeled as a cult, because that's more what I'm thinking about when I'm thinking of a cult. I'm not thinking about just the religion aspect of it, that you're worshiping something. I'm thinking about the control aspect of it. That is what I'm talking about when I'm talking about a cult. So now that we've been ranting and raving for a little while, Richard.
Would we say in relation to the bite model that if we were to take it as a very loose thing, we could apply some of those aspects to any organization, schools, or just normal churches? Or
it doesn't have to be a religion. It doesn't have to be a religion. It could be a political cult. It could be human trafficking. It could be an insurance scam. You name it. You can take, arguably even politics. You could take almost any sphere of human interest, and you could use those elements of cult control identified in Stephen Hassan's bite model and use them to essentially take over someone's mind. That's the scary thing about cults, is that they are a real thing. And even though many people watching this show may think that they are Superman, they're impervious to cult influence, all it takes, as we've learned in one of the calls on this show, is for someone to be at the wrong point in their life or to have dark memories from their childhood. And cults know how to prey upon those opportunities.
Yeah. And with what you were saying about sort of loosely applying the bite model to just about anything, you know, that's the reason that I consider it a tool and not like the end all be all of what is and is not a cult. But it's a very good tool. It's a very useful one. But if you apply it loosely to anything, yeah, you can be like, okay, well, this fits a couple of criteria. But that's why there's so many criteria on there. And there are varying degrees of how much something may or may not apply. You could say, oh, okay, well, they have, there could be one group that's just like, like one of the criteria is like they, the group might interrupt your sleep. It might control how much sleep you get. And there might be one group that just has kind of a strict rule in it about going to bed and waking up at a certain time, and that technically qualifies. But there are also other groups that are pretty much like you have to basically drink 5-hour energy every single day just to move on because of how hard they're working you or how much they expect you to do. So there's varying degrees of how much a group might fit the criteria in the bite model. And that also has to be considered because, like I said, both of those could technically apply under that same criteria, but I would consider one much more likely to be a cult than the other. So.
Yeah. Thank you.
Richard, did you get more than you bargained for in asking that question?
No. I'm really interested in cult survivors and things anyway. So I just wanted to, having you both on the show together at the same time, I thought it was a good opportunity to ask you both your opinions on the subject.
Yeah.
Well, thank
you for setting up that soapbox and handing me the mic. I appreciate it. All right, well, have a good one. That's
going to make a really good outtake, by the way. Little clip. Yeah. That's going to get loads of views. So thank you.
Oh, probably.